Andrei, it's great to see you today.
Great to see you, Jason.
So, Andrei, you are a well known economist, but there's something that makes you even more unique. You're the only economist that I know, at least, who worked directly with Vladimir Putin. You spent years with the guy and were his advisor. So, I was recently reading the Russian news, and I see that Vladimir Putin's global strategy isn't working as well as he thought. There's problems in Syria, there's protests now in Georgia against the pro Russian party that won there. The Moldovan elections didn't work out in Russia's favor. You knew Putin. Tell me, how do you think he's analyzing what's going on now? How does he see this? Where is his mind about all this?
All right. On one hand, yes, there are some problems appear on the horizon, but on the other hand, the most important direction that he is pursuing is Western direction in both sense, meaning in geographical sense, he's moving to the west in Ukraine and against Ukraine, but also Western in terms of culture and civilization. He has chosen the West as his main goal that he would like to defeat. And regardless of some little problems on second tier theaters like Syria or Moldova, nevertheless, on one, the most important direction, he thinks that he's still quite successful. And uh, first of all, it is in the seat of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russian aggression that is in the large-scale stage is going on almost already for 3 years, and altogether it's 21 year. So just not very many people just understand and realize that he launched this so-called project and in reality war from year 2003. And his main goal is just to establish control over Europe. And for him, especially based on what's going on in European countries, and without coherent response from Washington, he still thinks that he can be quite successful on this, the most important direction of his activities.
Putin cannot possibly think that things are going great for him internationally because there have been successes. There have been things that have gone well. At the same time, it's not going nearly as well, namely with the Chinese. It looks like Putin counted on the Chinese backing him and his war in Ukraine much more than they have. And I think he's been very disappointed by that. And at this point, that Russia is counting so heavily on North Korea to assist with the war effort is probably another indication that things aren't going nearly as well as he thought. But what's going on with the relationship with China? What's that overall?
China never promised Putin to fully support his military actions in Ukraine. Yes, Putin might hope that China would support him in this operation, but China is doing much more important for Putin. China is supporting him in economic sphere, and today the largest trade partner for Putin's Russia is China. China is buying a lot of oil, gas, some other materials, and China is the main provider of chips and other elements and components of the double use that is being used by Putin in military efforts as well. So now China effectively is the most important economic supporter of Putin's regime, but still trying to kind of to abstain from direct involvement in the military operation.
So, does China, though, have an interest of seeing Russia actually succeed, or does it have an interest of just seeing Russia wage war against the West? I mean, it's in China's interest that Russia is out there doing things that antagonize the West. It takes a lot of pressure off of China. Less people are paying attention to what they're doing. Or do you think that this is sort of a strategic move for China? Because of what's going on now with Russia globally and in other countries, this opens a door for them to look at the West response and then to judge what they should do next with Taiwan, whether or not they move in to take it. Where do they look at this strategically?
Let me cite Chairman Xi uh, when he visited Moscow early 2023. when he was departing Putin, he told him that it's the beginning of the tectonic changes in the world. And he, Chairman Xi, with Putin, want to see those changes happen, to participate in it, and to benefit from those changes and participate in those changes. And looking at the special language being used by Chinese, it's clearly the very open hint that China is very much interested in what Putin is doing, but being a little bit clever and shrewder, they're not trying to be on the front line of those changes, allowing Putin to be on this front line.
So let's go back to Moscow for a second. When you worked with Putin, what was he like? What was his personality? Who is Mr. Putin?
Mr. Putin is interested in changing uh, international landscape, in changing international system. And if we compare what he has inherited back then in 1999 or in year 2000 and what we have right now, it's a big difference. Big difference. What kind of international system was back then, and what we have right now. Right now we have not only one Russia, which is a revanchist, aggressive, imperialist regime. We have an alliance of those regimes. Certainly, Russia is leading this alliance, but also Iran, North Korea, Belarus, with a special relations with China, with special relations with regimes in Syria, in Venezuela, with a number of other organizations. Now we have a BRICS, and Putin bragged that today BRICS GDP is larger than G7. BRICS is constructing new institutions like BRICS Investment Bank. They're thinking about creation a new payment system. They're talking about the creation of BRICS currency. It is still too far from full realization, but their discussion shows what they would like to achieve. They would like to construct, to build a new system, not only within their countries, but internationally. So that is why we should describe Mr. Putin as one of the most active revanchist forces in this world.
And where does this all go? I mean, what is his end all goal? At this point, does he think about legacy? Or does he really have this worldview, the Russian world, of being spread out and that Russia plays a dominant force? Is this being done to ultimately just take assets to gain wealth, to put Russia in a better position by also taking over source of production in other countries and natural resources in other countries? Or is he doing this because he is trying to defend his regime? I mean, he is a dictator. He's been there for a long time at this point, almost a quarter of a century. And he knows that his number one priority, like all dictators, is to stay in power. Because statistically, if you become a personality like dictatorship, like Putin's, the chance that you leave peacefully and go to receive your pension is very, very low. There's a much better chance that things end badly for you. What scares Putin? What does he think of? What is the path forward that he sees?
Based on what he's talking about over the last 2 or 3 years and what he's doing during the same time, his main obsession is the West. And his desire to destroy the West, to defeat the West, and to replace the Western system with another system, regardless whether it will be Russian, Chinese, Russian Chinese, or anti-Western, regardless what kind of it is much more important for him rather than to keep any legacy for him personally or to create exclusively Russian world. So he wanted to destroy the West. And for that purpose, he unleashed the so-called global war or the world majority against the West in Ukraine, in Europe, in the United States, around the world. So he is enjoying the war in the Middle East. He is enjoying the war in the African Sahel. where a number of coups d'etats happened with heavy support of the Russian private military company Wagner. Now it's an African corps of Russian mercenaries. So we can look in any corner of the world if something that can damage the Western system, the Western countries, the Western societies, the Western citizenry, he's happy with that.
But that doesn't sound very strategic in the end, because it's damaging the other doesn't necessarily make Russia stronger. But more importantly, I'm curious, where does this hatred of the West come from? What drives Putin? Because a lot of people in the West today say that if we just give, for instance, Putin Ukraine, or we just agree with Russia to go halfway on various other things, and we allow the aggression, that Putin will be satisfied. Do you agree with that analysis? Is Putin really all about Ukraine? Or is this, as you said, a war against the West? And in which case, what is the origin of that?
The origin is probably we can look into his psychology or his early years or his years in KGB as a KGB officer stationed in East Germany. Also, he's working against the West back then, and after that, his country has been destroyed and collapsed, Soviet Union. When he had a chance to come back, I mean, and just to rise to the top of Russian political power. So probably at some point he came back to this idea to fight against the West, but with new tools, with new ideology, with new instrument, with new and with using market economy, because with all problems that Russia has right now, Russian economy is a market one. It's not the centrally planned economy as it was in the Soviet Union. So that is why, to some extent, his logic and his idea might be very close to what he had in his early years.
So, if that's the case, what's the recipe? What should we do now against the Putin regime?
Putin never stops until he will be stopped. So far, during his quarter of century rise to power within Russia and outside of Russia, so he demonstrated that he will continue his aggressive behavior uh, until he is stopped, regardless where he stopped. He has been stopped in Georgia in year 2008 when Mikhail Saakashvili, president of Georgia, mobilized resources his own and resources of collective West, and he stopped Russian forces near Tbilisi. Uh, Putin was stopped when Russian bomber has been shot down by Turkish Air Force in year 2015. Russian forces have been stopped in Nagorno-Karabakh by, surprise, surprise, by Azerbaijani forces. And Putin did not go further. When Erdogan closed Bosporus Strait in year 2022, Putin did nothing. Uh, in year 2018, uh, another branch of Wagner company in Syria has been destroyed by joint US Kurdish troops, and Putin did not respond. So we now know the main lesson, the main conclusion. If there is a real resistance to Putin, Putin might be stopped. But he might be stopped only if there is a real resistance with force. Without force, Putin will go further.
So, a lot of people have said that Putin, when he sees the West try to concede things, or in his eyes, shows weakness, it's actually an invitation for aggression. It's an invitation to do what he wants against the West. And we do see that a lot. And we know very well when we read the European press, American press as well, Canadian press for sure, where people say, listen, we don't want things to get worse with Russia. It's too much risk. And I would argue they're totally wrong. The fact is, if we don't stop Putin, things just get worse. And we've seen that. If we don't show force, he will not interpret it as anything else but weakness. So we have to be unified and strong. So, overall, going ahead, What do you expect globally that might happen next with the Putin regime?
You're right. That's exactly. Each time when the West, whether it's Europe, or whether it's the United States or Europe, demonstrates weakness, it invites more aggression from Putin. Each time when not only European nations or the United States, or even such country like Turkey or like Azerbaijan or Georgia demonstrate that they are really ready to resist Putin's aggression. So Putin can be stopped. So that is why the recipe that we can give to the world, if we don't want to be subjugated by this revanchist regime, by the all aggressions that Putin is waging, the only way to do it is not to invite him to the negotiations table. It's not to give him green light by demonstrating our own weakness. The only way is to resist, and resist with strong, formidable force. And this is the only way to stop him and finally to defeat.
Andrei, one last question. I was thinking about this. I wanted to hear what you thought. I think the Putin regime ultimately might not be nearly as stable as many people think. I think that there's a lot of things, internal factors, that we don't see. And we've seen in Russian history that sometimes what happens in the Kremlin is not only hard to predict, but when it happens very quickly. And there could be a regime change in Russia. Whether Putin is killed or he just dies, anything could happen. Eventually, he will die, though. That's for sure. What happens after Putin?
So, first of all, we don't know when it will happen. We do know that it will happen one day. We don't know when. And that time might be quite long. Um, it is unpredictable. Uh, the most unpredictable story about totalitarian regimes that nobody knows what will happen after that. The only area in political science that uh, cannot produce any reasonable model to say what will happen after, it is totalitarian regimes. It happen. It might happen anything from uh, gradual softening and even some liberalization, as it happened under Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, or it cannot be excluded as well. It could be even hardening of the regime. Even it looks like it's rather hard to imagine what might be hardening of current Putin's regime. Still, it might happen. So there are some people in the leadership of Russia or in some circles of Russian society that are even more aggressive than Putin. So that is why we would leave all these forecasts to the point when something happened with Putin.
Anything could happen at any time. Andrei, thanks for your time today. Great to catch up with you.
Thank you.